and movie producer Del Bigtree?
My view is very simple. You cannot be compelled to take a vaccine that's designed just to help you. If we develop a vaccine to prevent cancer or a heart attack, you have a choice. You have a right to die, you have a right to live, you have a right to take the vaccine or not. But if the vaccine is not intended to help you only, it's intended to prevent you from spreading the disease, the fatal, highly contagious disease to other people, then the state has the right to compel you to do it. The Supreme Court held that in 1905 in a case called Jacobson versus Massachusetts when the smallpox vaccine was at issue. Look, I was in Israel when this first broke out, and I was with Prime Minister Netanyahu, who was right on the eve of the election. And he told my wife and me that they were going to close down the country. My daughter was supposed to meet us in Israel, and she was kept out. She couldn't come in because Netanyahu decided to become very, very aggressive. And it had an enormous impact. Israel has had a much, much smaller percentage of cases than other countries and other surrounding countries. So actions taken by the state can have an impact, and vaccination is one of them.
Is there any group right now that you imagine as you're watching the trials, and we do see, numbers coming in about the death rates, and it does appear that it's going to be lower than smallpox for sure, but I'm not going to really grill into you there. What I'm curious about is there any group right now that you see should be excluded from that type of mandate? Is there anyone that you would say just right up front, look, when I said they can drag you to the hospital and plunge a needle in your arm, I didn't mean for this specific group? Is there anyone in your mind right now that fits that scenario that would be exempt from, just by nature, from the program?
Let me start by saying who should not be exempt. Religious people who have a religious objection should not be exempt for two reasons. First, the religious objection is nonsense. Christians, Jews can have no religious objection. Look at the Bible, the Torah, the Old Testament, the Jewish Bible. It has chapter after chapter about how to deal with people with communicable diseases. It requires that you take lepers and put them outside of the wall. There's all kinds of descriptions about how you know whether a person still continues to be contagious. And the concept of choose life in the Bible, which is often quoted against abortion by Christians, but surely Christian theology, Jewish theology, Muslim theology, all the Mosaic religions, the Abrahamic religions, all support preferring life. So I wouldn't exempt anybody on religious grounds any more than I would exempt people on religious grounds from other obligations under the law. I would exempt people who have a medical problem, which would be exacerbated by taking the vaccine. Well, there's a terrible case. I would never cite it as a precedent, a Justice Holmes' opinion, where he allowed, in a case called Buck versus Bell, for a woman to be sterilized against her will based on mental incompetence. And that was a case that was actually focused on by the Nuremberg principles. But the Nuremberg principles, I've read them carefully, don't apply, were never intended to apply to mandatory vaccination. So, and I do think it's a little bit insulting to the victims of Nazism and the Holocaust to, in any way, and you're not suggesting this, but some have in some of my emails, compare getting a vaccination to being put in a gas chamber or having experimentation done on you against your will, for your children, for no one's good. So the Nuremberg principles, I don't think are applicable, but the Due Process Clause of the Fifth Amendment is applicable, the Equal Protection Clause, the bodily integrity of the Fourth Amendment. All of these are relevant, and I think we will get a test case. Maybe I'll argue it, maybe I won't argue it.
So, Doc, you have no religious right to be exempted from a vaccine. You have no right as a Christian to say, I don't want that foreign object injected into my bloodstream.
According to Alan Dershowitz.
According to Alan Dershowitz, based on his religion, which is centered around
Chabad
Lubavitch,
Yes.
which practices Kabbalah.
Yes.
Now, we've always had religious exemptions in this country, but he wants to abolish them.
And I think it's disingenuous of Alan Dershowitz to bring up the pro-life argument when he's
He's pro-death.
That's right. So And so that's very disingenuous of him in that aspect of things, because he doesn't believe in that. So, that even makes the argument against what he says even stronger, because it says that, hey, I'm already on board with killing babies. What difference does it make if it's an old person or a sick person or not?
Good point.
You look at the angle he used to justify this position. He's basing it on, in his eyes, the Ten Commandments. He said as such in a Gatestone Institute article that he authored at the beginning, actually of May 22nd. It's titled "Misusing the Bible Against Vaccination." In this, Alan Dershowitz said it is a sin to bring up God, to try to use God as a justification for why you hold a position where you want an exemption, where you don't want a mandatory vaccine. He is saying, based on his understanding of teaching courses at Harvard about this subject, that it's a sin against God to bring up and use Christianity. New Testament Christianity, I'm sure he's referring to here, was not referring to in that soundbite there. It was all Torah law.
So who made the coronavirus vaccine debate a religious issue? Alan Dershowitz.
Yes, he did.
Right.
He said that we as Christians do not have any rights because we have to adhere to his Noahide interpretation of the Old Testament. And so I would respectfully tell Mr. Dershowitz, it is an old covenant which has passed away, and I live in a new covenant, and my Messiah is the Lord Jesus Christ, whom your ancestors rejected and still reject today. But my allegiance is to Jesus Christ, not to old covenant Levitical law. I'm free of old covenant Levitical